I need to clean the lens mount inside and out. As you get closer to the outside of the camera, of course, you're more likely to strike dust and other rubbish. And deeper in the internals where it can't get to so easily. This is all comparatively clean as these things go. It looks good. Now this plate, it's slightly bent at that point. Oh, it certainly is. Someone's given that a... Oh, somebody's... That pin that I bent on the shutter, you've got access to it from the outside through this area. Now there's a fingerprint there for a start, which means that somebody's been poking and prodding. But that's bent, and I suspect that's bent because when somebody was pushing in their tool, or whatever they were using to bend the pin, that they pressed on the edge of that plate as well. Well, that may account for the fact that I had to do any adjusting at all. So why would somebody do something like that? Well, as I say, you can adjust the shutter speed slightly from the outside of the camera. Of course, like anything that you're doing adjustments on, really, adjustments are done on a freshly serviced mechanism. But when people are faced with a device, whether it's a watch or a camera shutter, and the timing doesn't suit them, their first instinct is not that this needs to be serviced, it's that where is the adjustment? It's running a bit fast or it's running a bit slow. If I only tune up that adjustment, everything will be perfect. Which is completely the wrong order to do things in. But that's human nature, that's just what happens. Okay, so I've put a touch of molybdenum paste on that spring and put the detent ball in place. Now this little pinion here, this is what drives the cocking action of the diaphragm blades. And I'm just making sure that that's clean. Sometimes the grease that's on here is dried out or gathered dust, and it becomes impacted in the bottoms of the teeth. And that means that the little pinion doesn't run smoothly over the gear it's supposed to, over the teeth it's supposed to on the curved rack. So I'm just making sure that that's not the problem there. That was pretty clean. I'll give a touch of molybdenum paste on the centre for lubrication. This only goes on one way, it's got a recess in one side to fit over the pin. Yeah, I've got that plate in the wrong place, I have. The plate goes there and the pinion goes there. The shutter speed detents are these little notches in the plate here, the speed settings can plate. So I'm just giving that a touch of molybdenum paste so that that'll drop into the ball will move smoothly over it. Now I've got to get this correctly positioned. There's the pin there, that should fit in just there. This is a very snug fit in the case. There's something wrong there. What's going on? Make sure nothing's displaced, and that looks okay. That's certainly not sitting down correctly. That looks better. Let's try cocking it. That'll tell me if the pinion's engaged. Here, the pinion's engaged. I think the pinion was holding us up. 3 screws on this side. And something's not seated properly. Seems to be hanging up on this edge. Right at this point. I don't see why. Give it a bit of a push. Okay. Right, now I know what caused that. Just a bit of foolishness on my part. I'll tell you in a second. Get a screw down in there to hold it. Check that the pinion's engaged. It is. Shutter works. There's 3 screws in position. Only doing those screws up quite lightly at the moment. I need to make sure that everything is centered up correctly. That this black mask is centered up correctly, it's positioned correctly. That little tab on there can go back to its park position. We're not going to be doing anything with that. That looks good. So why would it not go down? Well, it's because this pin here, which protrudes all the way through, sticks out further than on earlier shutters. So normally you can just put that face down no problem. On this shutter it sticks out too far, so it was actually preventing the mechanism plate from dropping into the focus mount correctly. And it must be a while since I've done a Reflex 4, or they're not all the same, because I didn't remember that one. I'll get that screw in there. And the 3 screws on this face, get those tightened up. And that is the shutter ready to go back onto the front of the camera, really. It seems to behave nicely. We try it on B. B is always interesting. See if B works, just in case there's a problem with the B lever. No, that's fine. Okay, so the shutter's good. That can go back onto the front of the camera, which of course we've got here. Right, well, I better prepare the front of the camera for getting the shutter back onto it, I suppose. Now the shutter release here, I'm just giving that a very light wipe of molybdenum paste. As you can see, there's virtually nothing on there. You just need to show it to the molybdenum paste, really. You don't want gobs of the stuff on there. That molybdenum paste, that's Rocol, R-O-C-O-L. That's who makes the stuff I've got. I got a tube of it a long time ago now, 20 years ago. I've still got about a third of a tube. It'll see me out. It was expensive, but the money I invested on that's long gone. That's paid for itself over and over again. Some gunk on that spring. I don't know what that is. I think it's dried grease. See if that'll come off. Yeah, that's all it was. Alright, that moves nice and freely. That's great. The shutter. Right, well, the main thing we've got to achieve here, there's a couple of things to watch, but one of them is to get the flash contact up through this hole here. There's a little rectangular hole there, and the contact needs to come up through there. While I've got this here, I'll give the shutter release here a wipe with molybdenum paste, and if I get the flash contact lined up and the shutter lined up, the shutter release is lined up. I think so. Something's not lined up here. That's it. That's it. It's all lined up. What am I bouncing on? Is it the flash contact? Yeah, I think so. Okay, so that's in place. There are 4 black screws that hold this down. Now, not uncommonly you'll find the heads of these, at least 2 of them, are probably not as pretty as you'd like. Put the ugly ones at the top, because you can see what you're doing with those ones. It's more important that the good screw heads are down in these holes where you can see nothing. because you need them to engage with your screwdriver without any arguments. The ones at the top where the screw slots might be a little bit less than pretty, you can see what you're doing with them at the top. You know, in the case of this one side of one screw head there, the slot's a little bit damaged on one side, it's okay on the other. Well, I can see what I'm doing, so I can choose where I apply my screwdriver. Whereas the ones down in the hole here, you can't see a thing. Could be anything going on there, you wouldn't know. Okay, so that part's done. I've got the insulator washer that goes around the flash contact, that's here. I've scraped the paint off it, that'll go back on later. I do the flash contact fairly late in the piece. It's useful to have this wire a bit flappy at this stage so you've got access to the screws that you need to be able to put in without any problems. So the disc up here, that little cam that controls the blades in the viewing position, that needs to go in. Gather this up. So you've got two little shim washers. One's bigger than the other. The bigger one goes on first. I'll just get these pieces up here where I can find them. The washers, I'm just going to give them a wipe with molybdenum paste. Both sides, since they're conveniently flipping over for me. That's good. The larger of the two washers. These are the thin shim washers. Just drop that one down inside there. Get it back. It goes over the post. This little cam, this curved surface down here and the groove, that needs to be lubricated with, I'm using molybdenum paste, a wipe of graphite grease, a very sparing wipe of graphite grease would do the job nicely. There's a little pinion that goes on there. The pinion's got a little tab on one side which engages with the slot in that thing. I was wiping some molybdenum paste through the centre. Fit that in place on the post and rotate it until it engages with the cam. Yeah. That second little shim washer goes on the top there. This little leaf spring, I'll give that a wipe on the tip with some molybdenum paste. I probably don't need to because I've already got some on the shim. And the fixing screw, which is a very short black screw. Run that down, tighten it up. So that's that part done. The second pinion, this one, has got a little D-shaped hole in the centre of it. That's where it fits over this shaft. So it can only go on one way up. This rack, I'm just going to give that a wipe, both sides with molybdenum paste, sparingly, very sparingly. This goes in this way up, So flat side here to that boss. Now the engagement of the teeth. The lower pinion here, the tooth on the top of that engages into the first tooth space at the bottom. At the top, this cam should be back against its post more or less, and the tooth should engage, get this, the tooth on this pinion should engage with the 5th notch, which is right there. See if I can get this thing seated. It's not dropping in for me. That's it. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's that. And there. That appears to be correct. Now all this gets held into place by this bracket. We're going to add 2 spaces and then this bracket. Now in the centre, this supports that pinion at the centre. So I'm taking some molybdenum paste, running it round inside that centre. Put that in place over the top of that pinion. And put the 2 screws in place. Tighten those up. Carrying on. This gear, I'm just giving a wipe of molybdenum paste through the centre of that and put it over the core. Now one side of this, the teeth is slightly relieved on that front surface. That goes forward, goes towards you. The plain side goes to the back. Get this seated. This arm, I'll run some molybdenum paste through the centre of it, through the pivot point, and here is where it's going to pick up on the rack. So I want some on that boss there, just a little bit, and I'll see if I can get this hooked into place. You've got to be careful when you're putting that in place not to break off the little plastic insulator on the tip of it, which is very easy to do. It's held on with just the plastic's just riveted over. If you can't install it easily, then your best course of action is to slacken off this screw here and lift that bracket back out of the way so you can get it in without any damage. Just checking I've got this thing seated correctly. That seems good. I'll tighten that screw up. I'm going to check the action of the shutter now. I've got a cam here for testing purposes. Just put that in. Crank that up so the shutter's now open. Press the release, that allows that to drop back. The capping plate would rise, hit this, releasing this, the action would continue and the shutter would fire. So Shutter's good. It fires as it should do. Here's that fibre washer insulator. I'll put that over that flash contact, press that down into place. Fold down that flash contact, and now I've got to go and solder that flash contact and come back. Something's gone wrong. My blades aren't opening for viewing. Interesting. Means that that cam is not picking up the pin and moving it correctly. Well, it worked fine that time, but I need it to work fine every time. Didn't work that time. Yeah, it's certainly odd. Something odd going on there. Right, investigation. It's always important to be aware of potential problems, be constantly testing things, making sure things are working as you expect them to without any hiccups. Because if I hadn't noticed that and I carried on and assembled the front to the camera, it would be very annoying indeed to have to backpedal as far as that. So what is happening here? I've got the timing of this piece correct. Let's have a look. I think that might have moved. Oh, that sits quite differently. Okay, let's try it there. That's one tooth away from where I had that sitting. I suspect that it was sitting incorrectly, and when the shutter action continued, it actually caused the pinion to part company with the cam, because it's only got a small tab in there that locates the two, and this is actually a spring really, which helps keep those two engaged. If the force is too great, then obviously it releases. It works like a clutch, and I think that's what was happening there. I think that I had that one tooth out, and as a result that thing was releasing. If I got that gear the right way round, yes. Anyway, we're going to find out shortly. So it's not that it didn't work, it's that it didn't work repeatedly. It didn't work reliably well. Of course, we need it to work reliably well. Let's try it now. Yeah, I'm fairly well convinced. I had that pinion at the top here, and therefore the cam, one tooth incorrectly placed with that rack. Okay, now I can go away and do that soldering. Well, that's all done. The last piece of the puzzle, or the second to last piece of the puzzle before we put the shutter back on the camera here, is to get the little buffer pad here, the mirror pad, glued back in place. So I've got a bit of adhesive down here on a piece of paper. This stuff's a bit dried out, but it'll do the job. It goes on right here. The little notch is there to clear that little pinion in the middle, so that the teeth aren't grinding into it. Yeah, I'll just get that pressed down neatly into place. That's just the mirror buffer pad. Just making sure there's not a thread of adhesive hanging over the corner there. Okay, so that's good. One other thing. This little bright spot up here, that's where the flash connection's been soldered back, and I want to just cover that with a little touch of black paint so that it's not a reflective highlight. I think it's just about in the light path. Bit of extra paint here doesn't hurt, it'll help stick that washer down, which I didn't bother otherwise gluing in place. There's no point. That'd be a bit belt and braces. Right, so that's our shutter. Of course, our flash contact wire to go to the body is here, somewhat bent out of shape. I'll have to straighten that up. That wash is going to annoy me if I don't take it off there. It's going to be bent something like that without the extra kink there. Okay, so that is our shutter assembly, and with that sorted out, can go back to dealing with the body and do the last bit of preparation there, which was something that you don't do earlier than you need to, as you'll find out.